harshest critics, you know.
And they often are.
A wife is often the harshest critic of her husband.
I thought I was invincible. That's what you're trained to believe as a sports person.
There was 4 million people in Ireland who knew much more about managing football teams than I did. When it comes to music, I can spoof with the best.
Your sporting career is the best time you'll have, and you know you have to hang on to it for as long as your life, because everything else is pretty crappy.
And this is not lies. Stephen Rothschild has never spoken to Jim McGuinness in his life.
Yeah, welcome to the Saturday panel. Neil Treacy here with you until 6 o'clock this afternoon on Off the Ball. This week, our panel, we are just doing a pretty simple review of the week that was in sport. I'm joined this afternoon by Sinéad O'Carroll, news editor for the Journal.ie, Professor Niall Moyna from DCU, and also John Greene, Sunday Independent's sports editor. Thanks for coming in this afternoon, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Reminder to everyone, we are streaming on Facebook Live, we're streaming on Twitter and on YouTube as well, all at Off the Ball. And we are on News Talk as well for the next hour or so. So much to get through anyway over the next hour for what was the week in sport. Euro 2020 qualifiers, Women's World Cup. There's the issue of concussion in Gaelic games has come up this week. What next for the Leinster Football Championship? What next for Jim McGuinness as well? But I think we will probably start, guys, with concussion, because Niall Moyna, you came in very prepared with leaflets and
notes.
pages printed out there and everything. So that's the best material we obviously have today, so we'll jump straight in with that. But the background for the story, I suppose, this week is Jarlath Óg Burns of Armagh. 2 weeks ago in the drawn Ulster semi-final against Cavan, he was brought off with a suspicion that he had a concussion. Now, Armagh said afterwards that he wasn't concussed. He played the full 70 minutes the following week, but he ended up being taken to hospital after the match was released the following day. A statement from Armagh saying, "We can confirm following yesterday's game, Jarlath Óg Burns was taken to hospital. He was discharged shortly after arrival and returned home last night. Our experienced medical team will continue to assess and monitor Jarlath Óg." They didn't really give us an indication. Was it something to do with the suspected concussion he had the previous week? I know there were some people maybe saying it might just be dehydration, who knows. But over the few days then, we had Cormac Bann, the former Galway footballer, who announced his retirement from issues surrounding concussions he's had as well, and that just drove the issue on even further again, didn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a contentious issue. It probably has been really brought to the fore with the professionalisation of rugby. Obviously, it has been an issue in American sport for many decades, and we're really starting to see the issues relating to that, particularly over the last 5 to 6 years. Now, I sit on the GAA Medical Scientific Committee. I've sat on probably 9 of the last 12 years. And to be fair to the GAA, they have been extremely proactive in the whole area of concussion. Initially, Sean Moffat, the Mayo doctor, and now Dr. Sean Moran, the Donegal doctor, have really led it. They've worked very closely with the University of Pittsburgh Medical Centre, my old alma mater, actually. Worked very, very closely with them, who are world leaders on concussion. They work very closely with the Steelers in setting up not just international Irish standards, but international standards as well. And it's an extremely, extremely difficult issue. It's not binary. It's not yes or no, and that's the problem. And it's amazing, you know, when I'm asked for my advice, the first thing I say, if you have any suspicion whatsoever that there has been a head injury, you remove the player from the field. And particularly in younger players, because younger players, if they get a repeat knock to the head, they're at increase, and women in particular, they're at increased risk of fatal brain damage. So why would you even take the risk? And
are women at more of a risk?
Yeah,
I've never heard that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And I think the other big issue for me is managers. And I said this at inter-county level. Having worked with the DCU Sigerson for many years, whatever the medical staff said to me, and I lost very good players before Sigerson semi-finals and finals, if they said to me a player wasn't playing for whatever reason, there was no discussion. And I think once you get that level of trust, and I don't think that's there at inter-county senior level, because managers...
I was just going to say, it's definitely not there, because there's some weird stigma around concussion, and you see this in rugby as well. No one wants to... It's like it's a dirty word. Well, if we say the C word, we're in trouble if we play them then in the next couple of weeks. Where it's 12 to 14 days. Some people can get back. You don't actually have to stay 6 to 12 weeks, but it just depends. People seem scared to say the word just in case that we might actually have to bench them for too long.
I found in rugby in particular now, it's the coaches are probably much better at dealing with it and sitting people out and not taking the chances. But it is still the players who are afraid to even suggest I might have this head injury. I might not be feeling too well. because they know that as soon as they say it, they're probably going to have to sit out for a week at least.
Well, but the problem though is that even if you get an acute head injury, it may not manifest. You may look perfect.
Yeah.
And 5 minutes later, you may have symptoms. 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later. So if there's any doubt whatsoever, and it's not so much, 90% of concussions do not involve unconsciousness. So people think,
but that's why it's harder for people to bench themselves, because they feel fine and they feel like they're being over dramatic, and I need to go and play for my team. So The Independent had a piece with Dr. Anne McKenna earlier this month talking about concussion and how, particularly in GAA, there's this kind of atmosphere that you continue to play, and even if you think it is concussion, people still play through it. We had a situation in my local team, a club team, that one of the girls had diagnosed concussion, and she didn't want to miss out on the finals that were coming up and just didn't tell anybody. And then afterwards we kind of benched her, because we said, well, we don't want to be the one to hit you in a training session and you end up with a secondary concussion, and we've done it to you. But before that, there's always the risk that people won't bench themselves because they feel fine.
Yeah, and I think there is a large educational component to this. If someone walked in and said, look, I'm after finding out of a hole in my heart, you wouldn't even contemplate playing them, but it's only a little bit of concussion, but it's an internal organ, it's an organ that we know little about, and we're only skimming the surface of concussion research, and that is quite evident last year from the symposium that was held with the University of Pittsburgh Medical Centre here in Dublin. So again, it goes back to that simple rule, and it's a simple rule. If you have any doubt that particularly even a player may have taken a hard knock, and it doesn't necessarily have to be to the head, and in many of the rugby concussions are not head related at all, it's just the pure physical impact. They have no padding, and you remember the brain is moving around in the head when you're taking those knocks. So if you have any doubt at all, you just whip them off.
Do you think that there's in the GAA there's a situation where we're just a little bit behind rugby in terms of acknowledging, not institutionally, but for players themselves, and like what Sinead is saying about the stigma, I think it's even more than that, because there's a certain amount of stigma, but there's also a certain amount of awareness that a player knows they're concussed but doesn't want to come off. And if you look at any interviews over the last few years, in rugby too, but in GAA, about players who've been concussed, the Gooch talked, was it this week, about knowing he was concussed, covering it up. Brian O'Driscoll has talked about it.
And they only talk in retirement.
They only tell you when they've retired. They do not tell you at the time. So, as Niall says, it cannot be left to players. If there's any suspicion at all that there's been a head injury, you have to be extremely vigilant. And I'm a coach of underage girls, and I've had one instance of concussion in 8 years, and I didn't recognise it. And that was about 7 years ago. Didn't recognise it.
You often don't unless someone is vomiting or whatever.
They didn't recognise it. Yeah. She played on, and she spent the night in hospital. And that was the biggest lesson I've ever learned from concussion. But I was just thinking about what happened with rugby. Several high-profile players came out and spoke about their concussion openly in the media, and there was an educational process in the sport, and I think we need to see the same now in the GAA. And I was reading the Cormac Bain stuff this week, and he's really interesting because he flies against the face of what I'm talking about, because he immediately acknowledged he had been concussed a second time. I didn't realise until I drilled down into it, he had 2 major concussions, but his first one was actually playing rugby, and it was a particularly bad one. And then he got a second one playing for his club. And he immediately knew, it was a couple of minutes into the game, he immediately knew he was concussed, and he called himself out, and he has never played football since, and he won't play football again. And people like him can now be the people who educate the next generation about this instead of waiting until it is extremely rare for somebody. I can't remember a GAA player doing that before, calling himself out. Yeah,
he must have sought medical advice.
He knew, because his first concussion was so horrific, and it was so bad in playing for a club rugby match. He was very badly concussed. He was disoriented, and he couldn't even cross the road without losing his bearings. So in describing his second concussion, then 6 months later, he said he knew instantly that he was concussed, and he said, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah, and that's such a difference from Gooch Cooper was saying. He didn't even know what country he was in. But
well, there's the famous Brian O'Driscoll story about being asked what's the score in the Ireland-France match, and he knew he was going to be asked it, so he had checked the scoreboard before he was asked, because he didn't know the score.
And he wasn't going to come on.
Yeah.
But I think Rory O'Carroll was a really good example in one of the finals against Mayo. Yeah. And he played the last 15 minutes, and from what I hear, he didn't know where he was.
But we saw it happening in the Champions League semi-final recently.
That's right.
With a Spurs player.
Yeah.
That, I mean, obviously you're watching television, we can't know if a player is concussed, but you can have a strong suspicion that there's something funny going on. and he was left on.
Yeah, I think the tide is turning. I think maybe 10 years ago you would have praised those people a little bit for like that strength and character, you know, braving it out. Yeah, and I think that is changing a bit now. We do look to the managers and say, you know, if someone does go off with a HIA and it comes back and they come back on the pitch, there's generally an air of doubt around whether they should be there or not.
Back, you're playing in the county final. There's 2 minutes. There's 5 minutes to go. You haven't won the championship in 40 years. Your best player gets concussed, and the manager says to the physio, "Look,
you're fine.
We need Johnny. We've only 5 minutes left." But that's the reality.
But I think that's the problem that the GAA will have, because it's at the elite level. There'll be so many eyes on it. You will have doctors on the side of the pitch. If you're talking about Camogie ladies football, the local club game, there's not that support on the side of the pitch, and there is a lot. There feels like there's a lot more stake. Like you're saying, in the last 2 minutes of a county final.
For the inter-county game and for, I suppose, like the higher levels of club, to what extent is the decision kind of, are they able to take it out of management's hands? Is there, you know, are there independent doctors that are there? What
we are pushing for, or what may happen is, but again, there's an educational component to this, is that referees may take it out of the hands. The referee may turn and say,
is there a need for some kind of a HIA protocol in the GAA? I know it's a bit harder because it's an amateur game. In the professional game, it's something that's easier to police. But is there some system of introducing some sort of protocol?
I think with the GAA, the GPA looked for a concussion sub. Mm-hmm. Now the problem with that, it can be abused. You know what I mean? Because it's very easy. It's very hard. Well, it's not that hard to fake a blood injury, as we know, but it's very difficult. You know, it's so easy to fake a brain injury, and it could be abused. But I think the GAA certainly, and obviously that's the organisation I'm associated with, they have been very much aware of this. But it's getting the information out there, and maybe there has been some research done now with secondary school students, and there is a much greater awareness once you educate them, and maybe it should form part of a biology curriculum in Leaving Cert, that, you know, that's the time to get them.
It was interesting, that piece with Dr. McKenna in The Independent. She was saying that there's a certain, I'm not sure if I agree with her, but she was saying there's a certain wildness in GAA.
In that piece,
that is causing more problems than, say, the more professional sports of rugby and American football. She said that's why we're seeing a few more concussions. And she said hurling and football, because I was wondering, is it because of the ill-defined tackle in football? Is that what she's talking about? But she actually just meant the wildness of the game. She wasn't saying malicious misbehaviour or malicious wildness, but just that there's less discipline in general, even if it's within the rules of the game.
I read that piece, and that word jumped out at me as well, and I don't know, was it the GA person in me got a little bit defensive about
Same, and I was like, I think she's a rugby person, and maybe that's why she's thinking that.
When you watch the NFL, for example, and that whole thing, you know, and you see some of the hits now that are possible where the helmet has become a weapon.
Well, they can't now. That's outlawed.
That's outlawed. It was outlawed now, but last season was the first season it was. But like, it was a ferocious weapon to use. So you know, I thought the word wildness was a little bit.
I think, to be fair,
unfortunate.
We have an injury scheme that's been going now for almost a decade. The prevalence of concussion at inter-county senior level in both hurling and football is relatively low. Like, compared to other major injuries, it's very, very small, but the impact can be fatal, and that's the issue. And you just cannot take the risk.
Yeah, and it's something they kind of have tried to clamp down on a bit as well. I remember at the start of the season, in hurling in particular, they were getting very, very serious, and there was about kind of tackles around the neck or anything that kind of connected with the helmet. And I think there was an issue in one of the early league games. I think it was Tony Kelly got sent off for Clare, and there wasn't, I can't remember exactly what he did. There was some collision with a helmet, and he definitely didn't mean to do anything. It wasn't a dirty blow by any stretch of the imagination. And it was one of those ones where you did feel sorry for him, because he just kind of collided with someone. He accidentally caught a shoulder onto a helmet or something like that.
But once there's a head or neck contact, you kind of
had to get a red card. And immediately then you have all the people saying, oh, well, why are we giving out red cards for this? You know, it's a physical game, these things happen. But you also have to clamp down on it completely.
I think you're getting too close to rugby then when you know, people are looking at some of the high tackles that they're trying to stamp out, and people are like, this is what when the game was manly in the game, and you don't want any of that.
Game's gone soft.
You want all of that cut out. So I think in hurling as well, there's enough going on.
Dangerous play. There's accidental or intentional.
Exactly. There's enough going on in hurling. We don't need.
But I mean, you take it's a controversial one, and I'm very surprised that there wasn't any talk about it. But say the Paul Mannion red card that was being rescinded. I actually thought it was a harsh sending off, but it was dangerous what he did, And I could then see no justification subsequently for the red card to be overturned. It was just one of those things that it was unfortunate, but he was slightly out of control. It was a dangerous tackle, and the referee made a judgment call and he sent him off. And I'm actually afraid now, given the way the GAA disciplinary process works, that the rescinding of that red card will set an unfortunate precedent that other similar types of, high dangerous tackles, whether they're meant or not, doesn't matter. The word is dangerous. It's not intentional. Or
the outcome is the same.
The outcome is the same, and the guy wasn't, but it could have been a serious situation, and I couldn't actually understand why it was rescinded.
That's often the case, I think, with GAA appeals. There's often a repeal of the card.
Well, to be fair, knowing Jim Gavin, Jim Gavin wouldn't have appealed it if he thought, that he was harsh. It was unfair. So they must have, on principle, they must have thought it was unfair, and they must have the evidence for that. But going back to the issue compared to now in the 40s, 50s, where it was, it was tough, but the players were half the size they are today. The body shape of today's hurlers and footballers, even compared to a decade ago. So the actual hits and the intensity of the hits today are much greater than they were at any stage in the history of the GAA. Same in rugby.
How come women are more impacted? You mentioned that at the start.
I don't know what the reason is, and it may be in relation to the fluid, because the brain sits in a sac and it actually moves around. But women and individuals under the age of 18 are at much greater risk.
There is one question here as well on that advice issue. We'll put to you, someone here, how long after a concussion can you come back? I took a double hit a few years ago. Are you still susceptible to another one?
Yeah, there is a very clearly defined return to play protocol. If you're an adult, it normally is around 7 days, and that is graded over the course of the 7 days. And if you're a female or under 18, it's normally 14 days minimum.
And it's a gradual return.
Very gradual.
They kind of set it out that it has to be a gradual return. You can't just go straight back into full training.
And if you've had a documented concussion, you should get a doctor's certificate before you go back to play. That's what's recommended.
Absolutely. Okay, a couple of other texts as well. A child in my 12-year-old's class was knocked out yesterday. Doctors said she needed to be careful playing with her siblings. Her mother has her playing hurling this morning. That's not great to hear.
That's not one for this panel.
I'm glad she's playing hurling in general, but maybe give her the morning off.
Hopefully they're listening to Off the Ball in the car anyway there on the way home. In my experience, the grassroots GAA for kids under 10s, under 12s does not have a clue about concussion. They're handed a one-page sheet out to coaches and that's it. At rugby, all the parents and coaches were made attend a talk on it. My kids play both. That links into something you kind of said when you came in here as well, Niall, because you have all that information in front of you, as we were talking about earlier on, but you were saying it was actually very difficult to find where all that information was.
Information for adult players, for players aged 15 to 18, for parents of players aged 15 to 18, it's all there. And we do how to get that information out to the masses is a huge problem. And I know that the Medical Scientific Committee, we do brilliant work, but we just can't, even for me to find this within the GAA website was quite an ordeal.
Well, I think the thing with rugby is there's so much worry about kids starting to play rugby. I think before parents even send their kids, they're probably seeking out that information. So I'd say there's a lot of parents who actually actively seek those talks out and say, my Johnny's not playing until I know exactly what happens, or is it safe for him to do so. That's not quite the same in the GAA. I don't think that awareness or those concerns are out there when you're sending your 7 or 8 year old off to play football or hurling. Just because we haven't, this is the first conversation I've ever had about concussion in the GAA at kind of this size of a platform.
And also another text as well. What's this nonsense that rugby has the concussion issue sorted? I've seen instances here in Limerick locally of a 14-year-old with 4 concussions in the 1 year and daddy kept him playing rugby. I've also seen instances of players getting concussed playing rugby and being sat out for 3 weeks, while also at the same time going back to play for his GAA club and playing hurling without informing his GAA club.
I don't think anyone said rugby had it sorted. What they said was that the awareness factor in rugby seems to be higher. They're a little bit further on than the GAA in terms of awareness on the ground.
And as we were saying, it's because you've had probably a lot of the high profile players have come out and spoken on it. There haven't been as many GAA players doing it.
And I think you just see a lot we've physically seen a lot more concussions on television of rugby stars, like it happening in the flesh than we have with GAA players. Like we're hearing a bit more of people talking about past incidents, but you don't see it as much.
How many? I mean, could you count in one hand the amount of concussions you've seen in a GAA match happening on television?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
that's the point I make. It is very rare, but it only takes. The issue is when it does happen, we have to take it very, very seriously. And I mean, parents have. I mean, that kid that got concussed playing rugby and then went to play hurling. I
think that was an adult actually even. Yeah,
I mean that's mind-boggling.
So he took the time and sat out from playing rugby, but obviously,
probably because he was mandated
obviously thought, you know what, I can't play rugby, but I'll go around and play a bit of hurling and football to.
And that might be an awareness as well. He might know that he's just as susceptible playing hurling or football than he is. He probably thinks rugby is a greater risk. But
I don't know what's the name of the kid from Belfast a decade ago.
Robinson.
Ben Robinson.
I mean, that story. Yeah. Every parent should read that story. And I think that would be better than anything the GAA or rugby. Read that story as a parent. You know what I mean? If you're worried about your kids, and that will really inform you about the importance of taking any incident on the field where you think your kid has sustained a head injury, to take it very, very seriously.
I know we said it actually was hard to find that. For anyone listening at home that wants to find that information, where can they?
It is. It's on go into the GAA website and type in concussion, and you'll eventually get it.
Just a couple of other texts before we change topics as well. Hi everyone, I'm a chartered physio working in club sport, and concussion is without doubt the hardest area to manage. HIA subs may be helpful, but think some players would still be allowed back due to the lack of accurate tests to identify concussion and the late onset of symptoms. Refs improving, but have been told to hurry up, patch them up and get on with it. Players, management and officials need more training to recognise and standardise management. That probably is the nub of the issue, that it is very hard to pinpoint it exactly.
Correct, and there are many different symptoms, and
in rugby as well, they do have the HIA tests and the
and you could be fine.
Subs.
You could be fine and put back on, but you may not. The temporal changes.
But a lot of people say that test isn't good enough,
and there are a lot of issues with that test. So it's again my view on it is, if you have any doubt at all, just whip them off. It's not worth someone's life, you know what I mean, to put them back in there. There's no sport or no competition worth that.
I think especially if you're an underage coach, you have a huge responsibility to the kids.
Yeah, once someone has got a hit on the head, why would you put them back on?
Yeah,
doesn't make any sense.
Okay, is that it on concussion? Anything else to add onto it before we move topic? Yeah, I think we'll take a quick ad break now, and we'll have a chat in the next couple of minutes and see what we have next.
The Saturday Panel on Off the Ball. Join that conversation. Text us on 53106. Texts cost 30 cents.
February, March, April, May, June. Irish emergency and hospital services need a stable, regular supply of blood throughout the year. Unfortunately, the rate of donation dips during the summer months. We know you are busy, but we know we can count on you. So please make the time to visit your clinic this summer. Go to giveblood.ie, where every one counts.
With An Post Money Current Account, free yourself from fees by earning money back into your account when you shop with any of our money back partners, like Lidl, Intersport Elveries and Post Insurance. There's no limit to what you can earn back. Customers have earned as much as €200 in a month. It's just one of the ways we're making money a little more human. Search An Post Money Current Account or visit your local post office. An Post Money Current Account, for your world. Money back is based on spend with selected money back partners. See onpost.com. Terms and conditions apply. An Post is authorised by the Minister for Finance to provide payment services and is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland in the provision of such services.
It's Dacia's 7th birthday, and we're Ireland's favourite new car brand. So, competitors, here's how to become as popular as we are. Be shockingly affordable, offer amazing prices, have zero deposit, sell the Dacia Duster from €73 a week. Oh, I'm running out of time here. Should just visit the Dacia 7th birthday event from the 13th to the 15th of June at your local Dacia dealer. Finance is made under a hire purchase agreement. Terms and conditions apply. Subject to lending criteria, see dacia.ie.
The wait is over. A new age in walk-in medical care has arrived in Ireland, where long waiting times in busy waiting rooms are a thing of the past, where patients suffering from minor injuries and illnesses are seen within an hour by the very best medical practitioners delivering quality care in a modern stress-free environment. Express Care walk-in clinics in Cork, Tala and Santry are open to everyone and open 365 days a year. For more information, go to expresscare.eu. Express Care by Affidea. Be seen as a priority.
Bruce Betting, one of Ireland's leading bookmakers. With best odds guaranteed on UK and Irish horse racing, Bruce Betting has you covered. And with the Bruce Betting app, we're always giving you more. T's and C's apply. Bruce Betting, in-store, online and now on your phone. Over 18s, please gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
Little Johnny goes free, the twins go free, and the best mate from school who eats crayons, he goes free too. Because right now, when you bring the car to Britain with Irish Ferries, a whole car full of kids travel for free. So pack in all the luggage and kids you like and enjoy a perfect family break in Britain. The kids go free with Irish Ferries. But only if you book now at irishferries.com. Terms and conditions apply.
At Leia Healthcare, we understand that you have a lot to juggle. So as your health and wellbeing partner, we've introduced our 24/7 mental wellbeing support programme. Confidentially speak about things like your mental health, financial and legal issues, and work-related stress or anxiety. With access for all Leia Healthcare members to 5 face-to-face counselling sessions on applicable schemes. Because it's good to live. Leia Healthcare. Looking after you always.
Terms and conditions apply. Insurance provided by Ellipse Insurance Limited, trading as Leia Healthcare. Leia Healthcare Limited, trading as Leia Healthcare and Leia Life, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Programme available from purchase or on next renewal.
This week at Dunnes Stores, serve up a Father's Day feast with our garlic and herb Irish beef cowboy steak. Only €6. Grab a gift with L'Oreal Men Expert Range and Cadbury Milk Tray, both half price. And save even more with our 10 off 50 grocery voucher. Dunnes Stores, always better value. See online for terms and conditions, minimum spend required.
Are you paying a fortune to light your commercial premises? You could be saving up to 70% on your bills by switching to energy-efficient LEDs. ECI Lighting is Ireland's oldest lighting company and can invest all of the capital required to upgrade your building to LED technology. You'll make immediate utility savings, and we take care of everything, even recycling your old light fittings. Our flexible lighting as a service agreement includes a 5-year on-site warranty. Call us in Dublin, Cork or Belfast, or visit ecilighting.ie to find out more.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball.
Yeah, welcome back to our Saturday panel here on Off the Ball. I am joined by Sinead O'Carroll, John Greene and Professor Niall Moyna to talk about the week that was in Irish sport. We spoke just a little bit earlier on about concussion in Gaelic games. What we are moving on to now, though, is the Leinster Football Championship. And how long do we want to speak about this for?
Well, how long more do we have to watch it? I mean, that's the question. I mean, I don't know where to even start with this.
So you were in Croke Park last Sunday for the doubleheader, John.
And for the second time in my life, I was bored senseless at a doubleheader in Croke Park. And the last time was a couple of years ago when it was the Leinster semi-final doubleheader, and it was the same day that Ireland and France played in Euro 2016. So they had pushed the games back.
Oh, yeah.
So I went from watching a soccer game in a pub across the road to watching 2 GAA matches, which all through my life would be
an ideal day.
An ideal day, but there would be only one winner in terms of excitement and atmosphere. And there was a better atmosphere in the pub watching Ireland getting beaten than there was in Croke Park for a Leinster semi-final doubleheader. And that was the first time it really came home to me that we're in trouble here. And last Sunday again, I went in. I live in.
Was last Sunday the real low?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it came to the stage where there was 15 minutes to go in the Dublin-Kildare game. And we were just saying off, I actually thought Kildare did okay. And I could see this massive big black cloud coming from the city centre. Not a metaphorical one.
Literally a black cloud.
Literally a black cloud. And I said, right, I'm going to race that cloud to the car. And that's what I did. And I didn't win. The cloud won. But I left with 15 minutes to go, and I had no compunction about leaving. And I grew up in a house, my father was county secretary for years and years and years in Longford, so I grew up in a house where the idea
you do not leave a match
early was just anathema to us. And now I find myself going into a football game in Croke Park and leaving early, which I never used to do. In terms of the Leinster Football Championship, I mean, there shouldn't be a Leinster Football Championship at the moment. There shouldn't be any provincial championships. And what we're getting instead is the first sort of 3-card trick that was thrown at us was the Super 8. It's not a good idea. It's not going to work. It serves no purpose. The next 3-card trick coming down the hill is the 2-tier championship. So all these things are being designed so that we look over here, so that we won't look over here where the real problem is, which is that we have an outdated structure that doesn't work anymore. You'll probably defend the Ulster Championship, and possibly rightly so to an extent.
But that would only be this year. I mean,
it would only be this year.
This year it has been.
It's not as though it's been.
The whole idea of the way Gaelic football is going is really worrying, because it's going down a road that if it's not stopped and reversed, it's going to go past being saved. In terms of the struggle, I'm not talking about how the game is played, because how the game is played. And I know you've been very vocal about how the game. That's a separate issue, I think.
Yeah, there are two issues.
That's one that it'll evolve. Coaching changes, fads change. I think we need.
Agree with you. Yeah.
But how the actual structure of the GAA year, and I'm talking about hurling as well, and I'm talking about camogie, and I'm talking about ladies football. The whole how it's all structured. It's a mess. It's not going to work. And we're now have a new committee named last week by the GAA President John Horn, which has been told, we're told is going to take a blank canvas approach to the whole thing. And then 2 days later, we're told that we're hurtling now towards making a decision about a 2-tier championship. So how have they got a blank canvas if we're already talking about it?
They filled up that canvas fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's the first thing. And I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone, but why have we got a committee that's talking about the future of the GAA, which has the Dublin CEO on it, who's a paid official, whose job it is to, and he does an absolutely brilliant job in every county in the country, so I don't have an issue with that. He's a paid official who's there to look after the interests of Dublin GAA. Why is he on this committee? We have the CEO from the Cork County Board, most famously recently known for digging a €25 million black hole that the GAA and all of the people who are members of the GAA around the country have to fill. So the other thing about the committee is it's all men. So how are we going to work out what's happening to there's nobody from the ladies' games, ladies' football or camogie. There's nobody there to put into what they need. So the whole thing is just hurtling towards... I don't even want to think about how bad this could get, and that's separate from what's happening on the pitch.
The enjoyment levels of the
I'm not as worried about that because I think these things are cyclical. And I mean, when we look at some of those games in the 70s and 80s, you know.
But even when you look at the Munster Championship and the hurling last year compared to the Leinster and how it's flipped this year, like those things
come. They're fads. Things can happen. Coaching changes. But why I've always been steadfastly against a 2-tier championship, which is not to say that it mightn't be a bad idea at some point, but now is not the time for it. And I actually had sort of started to flip a little bit in recent months until, I thought about it more deeply. The whole debate of the last few months has been about a 2-tier championship. It's been driven by the senior GAA officials, and it's been driven by the media, including our News Talk and the Independent Group, with very high profile, and the debate has all been one-sided. You talk to players, and I've talked to a few, can't say I've talked to a representative sample, they don't want it. Not now anyway. Maybe if we change things up, get rid of the provincial championships, have a proper structured calendar where there's a proper competition, where teams are competing in a league championship style system.
Like what camogie have been doing for years.
Like what camogie have been doing, yeah.
The model is there to look at.
It's a no-brainer, but and the other thing with the committee, there's somebody from one of the provincial councils on it. I mean, we're not going to have the turkeys voting for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
The provincial championships could still be played in the same way in the early part of the year, in the same way that
that's what we do in
the pre-season competitions or the league. The league is the best competition the GAA has at the moment.
I was just going to say that. I mean, you actually look forward to the league. You look forward to all 4 divisions. Yeah. Because every game is going to be competitive. Every single game, and I think that's where the model is.
It is. Probably
and you are still
groups.
you're still going to get some hammerings. Of
course you are.
Yeah, I think everyone wants the solution.
We had a 13-0 game in an international women's football match. Yeah. These things will always happen.
But Neil, on average, if you look at the National League over the course of the league over the last 3 years and look at the spread of scores, differences between winners and losers, it's extremely small across the 4 divisions. It's a true competitive, and they're enjoyable games. The championship is a damn squib. I mean, do we even know it's on?
Well, I said to my sister this morning, I'm going on radio and I have to talk about the death of the Leinster Senior Football Championship, and I was like, I actually haven't even watched a minute of it, and she was like, well, isn't that the point?
That's exactly the point.
We haven't,
it's the ultimate indictment of it. I live in County Meath now, and I have a very close friend who goes to every Meath match, and He's one of those dyed in the wool GAA, absolute clubman, Meath man. Clubman first, Meath man second, and that's it. And he said to me the other night that he's not going to the Leinster final, and I actually couldn't believe that.
And that's a Leinster
he's not going
final.
To the Leinster final because he does not see the point. I mean, imagine not seeing the point.
But look at the attendance.
Yeah.
With Meath, Kildare and Dublin playing, what, 30,000?
36,000.
But look at 3 weeks ago, the quarter-final, the 4 games over 2 days with Kildare, Meath, Dublin, Longford, who else was playing? Offaly. Combined attendance over 2 days, 24,000.
Yeah.
I mean, people are not stupid. They're voting with their pockets and they're voting with their feet.
36,000 last Sunday for the double header. Bear in mind as well that neither of those 2 games were on TV, so the only way you were going to actually see that as well was to go there as well, and a lot of the time that drives up the attendance a little bit because it's the only way to see it.
I didn't even have the guilt factor last week. Like, I'm Kildare, I have loads of club men playing with the Kildare team last week. They're playing Dublin, and I didn't go in. And usually I'd be kind of kicked towards Croke Park by a bit of guilt, like you should go and support the lads even. And I didn't. And then I had other options. I was like, one of the World Cup's on, and I could go playing golf instead. And I had about 3 different reasons that I was like, it'll be grand, I'll do other things.
Just exactly what you said there is the other area that the GAA has been slow to adjust to, and that's the modern dynamic of the modern family dynamic or the modern person's dynamic, where Saturdays and Sundays are now taken up with different things, including work, which traditionally wasn't something of the past. But families have different expectations of what they want and what they do. And the idea of one person from the house up in sticks and going for the day to a double header in Croke Park and arriving back that evening and then getting up and doing a commute to work for 5 days. It's just not possible anymore, and it's not. If it's not entertaining, and if it doesn't.
The point. Look at Munster hurling. They're coming in there. Look at the crowd in Páirc Keeve. I mean, they're coming in their droves to watch it. I think if there is a quality game, people will go to watch it. But my concern for Leinster is, yes, Dublin are so far ahead of the rest of the teams. My concern is how poor the rest of them does in the league, where they're positioned in the league. What is going wrong in Leinster?
Yeah,
this is a malaise for over a decade.
Like, listen, like, which of these matches do you want to go to? Wicklow, Kildare, Meath, Offaly, Louth, Wexford, Meath, Carlow, Louth, Dublin. Like, they're the fixture list. Like,
the best GAA experience I had last year at intercounty level was the Monaghan Kerry game in Clones. That felt like...
Don't remind me.
That's what most people, I think, would say the same thing about last year.
That reminded me of that idea I had from childhood of going on a championship Sunday to a game to some part of Ireland or to some part of Leinster. In my case, there was no back door. But if you were going to Ockram or you were going to Newbridge or you were going to Tullamore, that was what that felt like. There was a fantastic atmosphere around the town, and it was out of Croke Park. It would have died a death in Croke Park. It was in a provincial venue, which happens to be a particularly good venue. And we got a decent game of football. Not a brilliant game of football, but we got a decent game of football. And entertainment isn't just about having this standard of, tiki-taka football on the football pitch. It's about everything around it. It's about the whole experience.
Totally agree.
And it's about whether a fixture has a purpose. I mean, if you have a game that doesn't have a purpose, what's the point in it?
But John, if you go back even 25 years ago, and I remember growing up in the 70s and that, I mean, every game in Leinster, Louth could beat Dublin on a given Sunday. Wicklow could beat...
You don't have to go back that far. You go back to my childhood, which is like in the early 2000s. When we used to love...
Thanks.
Yes. Sorry, everybody. But, I remember a time when it was, you would go to the early games in the provincials. Like, I remember Ireland were playing in the World Cup, so it would have been 2002, and there was Kildare played down in Kilkenny, I think. And we had both days, and again, it was the kind of big day out. I think I was a teenager, and we didn't know who was going to beat who. And and then there was actual excitement when you got to Croke Park, and that has gone now because Croke Park
totally
isn't you go there every second week in the Leinster Football Championship now, and it's not the same.
And this is all about structures and about getting it right and about adapting to the modern environment, and we're hanging on to something that has served its purpose. The back door has probably even served its purpose now. Like Colin Rourke was on that original committee that devised the back door, and he has openly said that it has now served its purpose. Things move on, and you have to adjust with them, and we're just not adjusting. And the provincial championship is the one that's strangling the GAA and holding it back.
But could I be devil's advocate? If the quality throughout Leinster was was much better than it currently is, say there were 3 or 4 teams that could challenge Dublin, would we be having this conversation?
I would.
Well, we're not having it about Ulster, but I was actually just about to ask there as well, are we just focusing too much on the Leinster Championship, because is Munster just as broken?
Well, there isn't a championship, and there has never been a championship.
There has never been a Munster championship. The Connacht championship, we have a piece in the Sunday Indo tomorrow, it's 25 years since Leitrim won their last and only their second ever provincial title. That's in a province with 5 teams. Okay, well, New York and London. They've won it twice in 100 and whatever number of years, and it will be 25 years or more before they win it again. So that's in a 5-team province. So there's 3 teams in Connacht, there's 2 teams in Munster. Traditionally, there's 3 teams in Leinster. There's only 1 at the moment, and then Ulster is a different kind of thing. But Fermanagh have never won a provincial title. So how is it fair that Kerry play 1 game pretty much to get into a Super 8? A place like Longford, which needs everything that it can get, has to play 4 games in its province. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't. Even if the Leinster Championship wasn't the way it is now, it'd be somewhere else. The whole point is that it's outdated.
It doesn't make any sense. If someone came in and you explained it to them,
the league is, we have a competition there, and Camogie have shown that we have a competition there that actually shows us how it can be done.
But again, is it not structures within counties? And I don't want to brag here, but the job Molecule Work and the Monaghan County Board have done over the last decade, I mean, they've batted way above their weight.
Monaghan have been doing that since the 80s now.
Yeah, but the issue is why are Monaghan, with a population of around 60,000, you know what I mean, being able staying in Division 1, being competitive every year in Ulster?
Structures.
Yeah, but so is it structures within counties, within provinces, or is it a national structure? Like Monaghan are an ecosystem within the GAA, and an ecosystem is flourishing. Why have Meath been down for so long?
That's another debate. I mean, that's mismanagement in the county. I mean, you take Longford, where I'm from originally. I would say that over the last 10 years, Longford has probably, with a population of 35,000, has been punching above its weight. They've beaten Monaghan, they've beaten Mayo, they've beaten Derry.
And should have beaten Kerry.
Should have beaten Kerry. You know, so there are good structures there, but the good structures in Longford will only take you so far. The good structures in Monaghan, that's the best Monaghan team that there has been since the Nudie Hughes team. Overachievement for them last year would have been getting to an All-Ireland final. They got to the semi. To the semi, and that's probably where they're at. Yeah.
I think it goes back to what you were saying about having a purpose for every game as well, though. So if you're looking at a Kildare team that have wildly underperformed, I would say, and don't have a belief that they can go in and beat Dublin, even though they probably have the talent, they definitely have the raw talent to do so. If you're going in, they don't have the belief, and then a lot of the games lose purpose then. So, you know, in a way that we saw when they played Mayo last year, there was a real purpose to that match that was outside even the result of it. There was, you know, the whole story around it. When you look at that fixture list for the Leinster Senior Football Championship, there just seems to be lacking. Like, what's the point? Like,
but what are you suggesting? What's the solution?
I don't have the answer. I tell you what, I'd love to have been on that committee, though.
Right.
I'd love to get into a room with a lot of people and start working this through, but I am saying the provincial championships as the focal point of the championship.
They should be the warm-up. They should be the warm-up. They should be the start of the season. Provincial championships.
And
have the
take
cups,
the league as the basis for a league championship through the summer. And the other thing, and we had 2 interventions from players this week, which I was delighted to see. Paul Cody's from Carlow about the hurling situation, and Cahir Keeley from Laois saying something else that I've long believed, which is that there is far too much focus on the county game, there is far too much time, it absorbs far too much time, and that you find a better balance between club and he's a county player. I think he's dual player, is he?
He went to DC, he's a very good lad and a really good player. I couldn't agree with you more. I think we have lost
Let's send them back to the clubs.
We have lost the runaway. In fact, the clubs should be releasing the players to the county, not the other way around. We've got it so messed up.
That is absolutely it.
But the GAA had to take responsibility. It was purely about generating revenue for the last 15 to 20 years.
You know what's happening, and this is what it all boils down to. The GAA, we're in a global society now, and the GAA, and I'm not talking about Croke Park, I'm talking about the GAA family, has seen how sport has developed around the world, soccer, rugby, etc., and kind of has got intoxicated by that and got sucked along by it. The GAA was never meant to be those things. It has outgrown itself, and it needs to come back down to a level, and the county game needs to have some sort of a cap placed on it in terms of the amount of time that the amount of money that it's absorbing, and the amount of time that amateurs are being expected to give.
Because it's shortening careers as well. You don't have people playing until they're in their mid-30s or late 30s anymore, really.
I think 20 to 30. There's a guy in Cork, and there's a young fellow in Cork, Sean Powdery, UCC guy. He's on his fifth. He's 21. He can't play next Saturday night. He's on his fifth serious hamstring injury of his inter-county career. That's. I mean, this is more your area, Niall, than mine. I mean, this is. I'm not talking about burnout, but I'm just talking about.
Yeah, and
we've gone to a level that we can't sustain.
But even if you're not talking about burnout, even if you're just talking about commitment, like getting into your car and driving to training, commitment, even if everything is going completely well for you.
I've been saying this for years.
You don't do that for 12 years.
And being a physiologist, there's absolutely no reason why you cannot play a county game on a Sunday and release the players back to the club, and they could be playing the following Sunday. They may not have to train until maybe the Thursday. Let them play a club game and go back and train once with their county before all the time they spend training from November until March. Don't tell me they still need 5 times or 4 times a week to meet for collective training. If you're doing your job right, 1 session a week with the game at the weekend and the same with the club, and that should be continuous. My concern is, in 50 years' time, we may not have a club structure to be able to facilitate, to be able to provide players. And that is a genuine concern. In rural Ireland, they're having problems now even fielding teams.
Well, you take Leinster. There are less clubs in Leinster, even though the population of Leinster has grown exponentially. There are less clubs in Leinster now than there was 20 years ago. So, I mean, how is that happening? It's happening because we're not moving with the times and we're not following the way modern society would like us to go, and we're not acknowledging the problems that we have. It's oversimplifying it, but I coached an under-16 girls team this year, and we were delighted. One of our girls made the county team, and it was such a simple system. It happened that a lot of nights our trainings clashed, so she went and she trained with the county. They knew when the county games were, so the club games were organised that they would not clash with the county games. They'd be on a different week. So she never missed one club game. She missed a few training sessions, all right, but she was training with her county. You don't need to, at 16 years of age, you don't need to be doing club and county training.
That's the problem.
But you see, and it comes back to this, and you've encountered this because you've managed at a high level. It's a huge problem is the egos of managers. A huge problem, and they're not being checked.
You are my player, so you do what I say.
And because it's my reputation. It's not the greater good.
And a bigger issue is if you have a manager coming from an external, and they could be the best manager in the world. Why would they worry what's going to happen the day after they leave? There's no transfer of ideas, and new system was in it, and it's as though they've done nothing in the past. And this is replicated over and over and over again.
Pushing the stone up the hill.
And it's amazing. This whole conversation has been about inter-county. I would love to sit down and really bring in people who are heavily involved with the club scene and ask them for their opinion, because I think their voice has not been heard. I mean, the GAA will tell you it's been heard. It's not. It's the inter-county is what's both hurling and football is what's driving the GAA probably for the last decade.
Another one of my hats is I'm a delegate to the Meath County Board from my club, the Men's County Board, and the last 2 meetings have been dominated by clubs complaining about not seeing their players, about games being fixed at ridiculous times to accommodate an inter-county schedule that is no longer sustainable, about adult club games being called, about small clubs now, because a lot of clubs in the periphery of Meath are small clubs, and about 17 and 18-year-olds being told by underage county managers not to play for your club on this particular week or that particular week. And it's just...
One of the things I find extremely distressing is that when I hear that inter-county players, they've got to get released for 3 or 4 weeks before the game, they've got to get recovery afterwards. But then when the championship's over, they have absolutely no problem scheduling 4 games in a week for club players. And they're the players who shouldn't
play your
be getting...
entire championship in terrible weather.
But even physiologically, they're the players who are not ready to play 4 games in a week. It's just the system.
There was one team in Meath fixed in the last couple of weeks to play four adult men's games in 12 days.
And that's just ticking a box to say we'll fulfill the fixture.
And then you spend months waiting for games, particularly if you're a club player. From you were saying about hearing from a club player, like I played on the periphery of a county team for a few years, but would never have been starting 15. So I always felt like a club player, even if I was going county training. And for us, just felt if the girls are training and they're coming back, and our fixtures were always the same. Our fixtures were always on non-county weeks when we were talking
ladies
about
football in Camogie are brilliant at doing.
Yeah, they're much better at talking to each other. There's bad years, but we're actually much better at just being able to face each other and say this isn't on. But once you see the girls are training and then they are released for matches, everyone's fine. There's no issues then. It's just a really simple, and you're talking about the blank canvas. If you had a blank canvas now and someone came in from, I don't know, UEFA or FIFA and looked at how we do things, I think they'd be they'd be saying, well, we're not great, lads, but this is completely insane.
And we're not saying it's easy, because you cannot design a fixture schedule that accommodates the Longford club season and the Cork or the Dublin club season.
Correct.
So what you have to do is you have to create windows. And in those windows, and if you have an inter-county game on a Sunday, then the previous weekend, fine. If there's a championship, Leinster championship, or well, hopefully not Leinster championship, but hopefully a championship game for Meath on a particular Sunday, the previous Sunday is free
and then
club football, but the following weekend is not.
But then going back to what you were saying about checking the manager, because I think what happens then is there's that creep of, oh, well, what that guy did to make sure that Laois won that game was actually he had all the county team together for that week, and he had them running up the hills, or he had them doing some fancy...
But in many instances we do blame the manager. And in many of those instances, it comes back to actually weak county board officials.
No, I'm not blaming the manager.
Allowing the manager, to dominate.
The manager is always going to want to have it clear
Of course, the manager is going to want the best, but it's about checking them and making sure that.
That's absolutely the point. It's about having a strong executive that says, no, you're not going to stop them from. There is going to be club matches 2 weeks before that game. We have to play them.
And like the county games, I think if probably county players are listening to this, the inter-county scene to county players is as, if not more important, I think, based on what is happening in your year. Like Man City would have for the Champions League this year. So depending on what's happening in your life, sometimes the county final is more important, sometimes the All-Ireland will be more important. But like I'd say Dublin teams now, some of the Dublin players would prefer a county final rather than another All-Ireland. It depends.
I'd be happy with 5 in a row.
Maybe after this year. But like it is really important for them that the inter-county scene isn't playing second fiddle to the club either. It's about getting a balance for people.
But I think we have to stop having this anecdotal evidence. There's enough. I would like all 32 counties to provide data over the last 5 years of when fixtures, and that should go into a computer and it should be generated, and that should be the base on which they work from. Instead of where we do a bit of this, let's all that information is there, and I think within 2 months all of that information could be provided at a national level as well, so people could debate it. So what happens in Monaghan? What happens in Longford? What happens in Dublin? What was the average delay or the average duration between championship games, between club games? How often were club league games? Did they have an event where they had to play 3 league games, say in 7 days, something like that? We need that information, and it's all available.
Yeah, because we hear how well Kilkenny have done it always, that they managed to have a vibrant club scene.
Yeah, and there's problems there now, and there was always a very good club structure in Kilkenny, and there was always a very good balance between the county and club scene there. And like Brian Cody spoke before Christmas about the frustrations of the same problems now starting to appear in the club scene in Kilkenny. And he's the county manager. Like he's always been quite open.
But John, you hit the amount of money
it's too much
spent on inter-county, you have to justify that expenditure, so you want to make sure that your players are being optimally prepared, and the other 95% just get thrown by the wayside.
I don't think there's any justification for some of the money that's been spent, and there's far too much collective training at inter-county level.
I think it could be reduced by 60%. I've said that for years. I think it's ridiculous. The amount. I mean, I don't think professional soccer players would train anywhere near to the same extent. I was involved with hockey, baseball and football in America, and I can tell you they didn't train anywhere near what Gaelic footballers are training. It's just
one of their problems they talk about is boredom, because they're not training so much. And Damien Dempsey, I heard him during the week, was saying like after a 3-week camp with the Irish team, you would be sick of the sight of each other. You just want to get away from each other.
I felt the same with some of the teams I was involved with. You'd say to yourself, oh Jesus,
they're doing nothing.
What's the purpose of tonight's session? You felt you just had to be there because there was 3 weeks to a game, so let's have 3 sessions this week.
A few texts here. If your county was winning the Leinster final every year and serious contenders for the All-Ireland, you would not be so negative. The GAA can strategise as many structures as they want, but this does not change the fact that winning is a mentality, and it appears that other counties outside of Dublin do not have the psychological tools to adapt, therefore keep on losing. I, for one, am looking forward to an entertaining game between Roscommon and Galway, and I'm not from either one.
We're not talking about winning or losing. We're talking about a proper structure that feeds the game, that's good for the game of Gaelic football. We haven't once talked about Dublin's dominance in Ireland even, or money, or that's not the point that we're making here. We're making a point about what's fair and what should we be doing for Gaelic footballers and hurlers.
And for fans who want to go watch games.
Because ultimately, if people don't want to go to watch it,
and even if Dublin are winning 30, how many Dublin supporters were there last week? Compared to 2005, 2006, they were getting 75,000.
As I said to somebody during the week, they came late and they went home early.
And on that as well, is that number, that 36,000, the amount of bums that are going to be on seats in Croke Park, is that ultimately, before we wrap up here now, is that what's going to decide the way forward for the GAA, what their tiered structure is, what their plan is going forward, how many people are going to the matches, and how much money is coming through the gates?
I think the GAA, this year is a wake-up call, because the punters are voting with their feet. And I think there's something seriously wrong when you see Kildare, Meath and Dublin playing in Croke Park on the semi-final, and you have 36,000. I'd be really, really concerned.
Traditionally, counties that will travel in droves.
And don't have to travel far.
Yeah, exactly.
I would expect 15 years ago you would have got 70,000 plus. Dublin.
Yeah, we had a tweet. I think it was Kieran Cunningham tweeted there. I must dig this out here now because he had it. Yeah, Kieran Cunningham pointed out before the double header last week, at the time, the 75,000 who turned up for the 2009 Leinster final had been described as slightly disappointing.
Yeah.
Because it didn't sell out.
Yeah. 2009, 75,000 people.
And there is a certain, there is cyclical patterns to these, but I was researching something recently, and I think it was one of the 1988 All-Ireland hurling semi-finals, there was 5,000 at. And in the late 80s and in the very early 90s, the GAA was in quite a dark place and managed to recover out of it and recover very well. And we've now reached another point 25, 30 years later where we're at another fork in the road and we've got decisions to make.
We'll move on ever so slightly now from that. I want to bring up the Women's World Cup, because we were speaking about, we kind of just very briefly mentioned it earlier on, the 13-0 that the USA had against Thailand during the week at the Women's World Cup, and the reaction to it. Some people saying they really shouldn't be running up a score like that. Some people saying, I'm okay with them running up a score. It's celebrating every goal like it's the winner in a World Cup final. That probably irks some people. And others then are, I'm absolutely fine with it either way. I don't know, did you watch it? What was your take on it?
We were expecting the drubbing, and actually the game so far, I was expecting a good few more one-sided games. So it's actually been kind of good that there have been... I genuinely thought there'd be a lot more hockey games like that. So it's been good that there hasn't been a couple of more surprising elements. But it was expected. I was thinking about the people saying you shouldn't celebrate, and I thought, well, if you're going to a World Cup and everyone has their individual goals as well as the team goals, so if you don't know what stories are going on behind the people who are scoring that 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th goal, you mightn't personally celebrate it, but also it might be the first goal you've ever scored at the World Cup. So you might feel like, if I don't give myself a pat on the back, when's it going to happen again? Or if
you do score at that stage in a drubbing, you're not kind of in your head going, it's 9-0 now.
Yeah, I think
that should get us over the line.
Most of us probably would, but I think again that's kind of a little bit of an Irish attitude as well. So if you put an American positive mentality on it.
I'd forgotten you went to college in the States, but the thing that struck me was that, well, two things. One is it's a perfectly human thing that this is the best team in the world. So I'm assuming that there is intense competition for places. So they're sending messages to the people sitting on the bench, you're not getting out of me. That's one. But two, and you know this, surely it was just very reflective of the American sporting culture, where it's just this clinical, no sympathy, no mercy, you keep going, you keep going, you keep going.
I think you do keep going. I wouldn't have any issue that they put up that score. I think you just keep playing football. You have 90 minutes. Yeah. They know they're going into a situation where there is there is going to be one-sided games when they're
and
playing.
I think referred to women's soccer, you know, it's really in its embryonic stage, really at the World Cup level.
Yeah.
I remember back in the 60s and 70s, some of the men's World Cups, and there was, you'd see hockey scores as well, you know what I mean? Teams getting beat 5-6 and 7-0, and the game was progressive. Now it's an international, and because of the money, that will eventually happen. I think the window will narrow over time.
Well, look at the World Cup you're going to see in the Rugby World Cup in Japan. You're going to see there are going to be some
are you telling me that a New Zealand player
ridiculous
isn't going to do swan dive after swan dive over the line as they're, you know, tearing a new one for Uruguay or something or whoever? You know, it's just the fact that it even became an issue is...
Yeah, I was surprised it became an issue, and then I was thinking, is it because people are expecting these women to be polite? I don't know. I remember playing hockey when... Yeah, I think maybe you're right. I remember playing hockey when we were little in first year, and you weren't allowed to put up a score of more than 7 against a team, and we used to go, and we were just a local school, and we used to go to these kind of fancy Dublin private schools, and if we were beating them, we'd be like, but miss, we want to just keep scoring. You know, like the goals are in front of us. What are we meant to do? Were you, like, it was meant to be a gentlemanly thing or
it's
whatever.
It's a basic human urge that if you put a ball in a bit of grass and there's some sort of a target to aim for, that you're just going to keep going for it and keep going for it
and
keep going.
Like, it's kind of nice, a bit of practice. Like, we can practice that short corner and see if we can get a goal out. You know, why would you stop? It's a bizarre human instinct.
There's a
that
more
you're trying to
interesting thing which I'm curious about, because I've had the view for a long time about whether girls and boys playing together underage. And I've from my experience in watching at my club, I've seen that it is far more productive when they're separated. But I've just Karen Barsley is just talking this weekend about, she thinks that at elite level, you know, in professional sport and in academies, once you get to that, you know, into your teenage years, that it should be mixed.
Yeah, there's definitely
which I hadn't thought about
still
at that
have thought
level.
that we should be mixed for longer, and I definitely think it definitely benefits the women's game for longer. I think anytime you speak to the exceptional players on the women's side, they will always talk about playing for longer with either brothers or teams. My sister played football with the boys until she was allowed. I think it's under 12.
At grassroots level, I think it's too much of a deterrent for the ones that are not exceptional.
That's the problem. It's really good for the exceptional ones, not so good for the non-exceptional ones. So it's about creating a balance. And probably going back to what we've spoken about before, is maybe age isn't the perfect way to separate people. Maybe it should be by size, and I think New Zealand do that.
New Zealand
and maybe that's a better way, that you could actually incorporate more of a mixed game to a certain age as well.
She said she's a better goalkeeper because she trained in the States, in the university and in academies with men, and she learnt things.
Well, up to around 12, there's no difference physically or physiologically. You know, there's no, you know, all the parameters that we'd measure in a lab, they wouldn't particularly differ. But after 12, they just diverge enormously, and boys would have an enormous advantage physically.
So in the past, girls would have played up to under 12 with boys a lot more within soccer, because there wasn't girls teams, but now there are obviously
in Gaelic you used to be able to go to, was it 14?
Under 14
but they're developing so much even earlier now, you know, and that's, you know, it might even go back to 10, but around 10 or 12 boys have an enormous advantage after 12, and that can be dispiriting for some girls who don't have the oomph to compete at that level with the boys.
I would hope that we wouldn't need to do that, because the reason that she was improving because she was playing with the men is that the structures weren't in place for the women's game, and there wasn't...
Well, she was getting better coaching.
She wouldn't. Whereas I would hope...
played at a faster pace.
So that was one point that she made.
Execute faster.
Yeah, I would hope that you wouldn't need that as much, because we will be at a point that our games for the kids now growing up, they will have proper structures, they will have the option of having better coaches, and the game will be at a level. Like, I think going back from when I was younger, there weren't enough girls who were interested from a young age, so that when you did get to 13, 14, 15, you were still talking about a big mix of abilities, whereas hopefully that won't happen, because girls are starting younger, and the ability will be greater when they're 12, 13, 14.
But you need the fact that we're talking about this is fantastic. I mean, having lived in America for a long time, when I came back, I could not get over the ladies' GAA. And no matter where I go in the world, I tell people about it. I mean, it is phenomenal.
Growth in playing numbers.
But the young girls, the impact on their lives, and the quality of the sport, of ladies' football. I mean, it's phenomenal.
And that is down to, so the TG Carher deal that long ago was absolutely groundbreaking, so that girls were seeing women play football, they were playing it, so the competitiveness of football is just there. So that's why the the game is so much better because the competitiveness starts at a really young age, that it is really hard to get onto your teams. It's really hard to get onto a county team. And it's like, look at the amount of players who aren't necessarily the very top football players here getting professional contracts in Australia because the game is at such a level
Which
here.
is why, you know, when you strip it away, the level of exposure now for the Women's World Cup on television, it's hard to see now what the point of it is, but it's when it's only in 10 years' time that you can really assess.
Do you know what?
the impact
I'll give
that it
you an
has.
example. Last week we had a load of toddlers over in our house, and I had the World Cup on, and one of the girls who was two, she said to her mum, "Mum, do you like football?" And she said, "Yeah." And then the little 2-year-old said, "But girls don't like football." So whatever she has picked up in her life at the age of 2, she thought, so we sat her down and we showed her the 22 women that were on the pitch in front of her and showed how each and every one of them was a girl. But how powerful is that? And my sister sent me a text during the week and said, I would have loved if the Women's World Cup was on telly when I was younger, because soccer was her first love. She played with the boys. She had to stop at under 12. There was no girls team around our town, and she didn't know it was an option for her. She ended up being an amazing camogie player, so we're lucky for that.
There was a good twist in that story, and I can't remember. I think I heard it in here, one of the panels I was in, but I can't remember for sure. But it was a similar story. It was an only girl, or it might have been 2 girls in the house, and they had visitors over, and the boys were playing football, and the girls said they were really into their football. The girls, and the girl actually said to her, "Mammy, do boys play football too?" Which is an even better twist.
Which shows that it's so much of our conditioning rather than anything.
But it's interesting in America why American women are where they are today. It was because back in the late 60s of Title IX that mandated that every federally funded institution in the United States had to provide the same number of scholarships to women as they did to men, and that revolutionised. And it's amazing how one small act has been transformative globally. Because I don't think there'd be any women's GAA. We wouldn't have anywhere near the same level of participation of women in sport if it hadn't been for that single event. And it was huge.
And I think some of the games probably aren't up to the standard we're used to watching of football on TV, but when we get to the business end of it, because we'll know a lot of the stories, so like we'll just be a lot more familiar with players that we want to do well. So people, even if the standard isn't what people are used to in international football standard, although we are, just on the back of what we also watched in this week on that front, but people will care about who wins, so that people mightn't want the US to win because they might have taken against them because of that 13-0 drubbing, or people might want to see Phil Neville do well with the England team. So there'll be stories.
Has that kind of created a nice little pathway then, where we've created this enemy, this team to dislike? And it's to do with stuff out on the pitch.
Well, that's part of the narrative of any major sporting event.
They're the bad guys now.
Yeah, you have to have the stories to get people sucked in. It's entertainment.
And I don't think it'll worry the Yanks. I don't think they'll be in the least.
Not.
And
wouldn't have it any other way.
No.
Like if this was a film, they'd be in black jerseys, but anyone against them is going to be the underdog, and probably people will shout for them. But it means by in 3 weeks' time, when we're sitting again, you're probably going to be talking about it again. We'll know more of the players. Everybody will know more of the players, and that's half the battle with sport, is to try and get those narratives across to people so that they care. So there's lots of games that we watch that aren't the quality that we want, but once there's a purpose and a point to the matches, we'll watch them.
Right, we've gone way over time. It's here. We're going to have to.
And we fixed nothing.
We fixed absolutely nothing.
Identified all the problems.
Yeah. Someone else can worry about that. Next week we'll worry about the solutions. But Sinead O'Carroll, John Greene and Professor Niall Moyna, thanks a million for joining us on the Saturday panel this afternoon.
Thank you.
Can, if you just caught the tail end of it, you can podcast it all back later on this evening on offtheball.com, or you could also watch it back on our YouTube or on our Twitter streams as well. We'll be back after the break.
Off the Ball on Newstalk. Alive and Kicking with Claire McKenna.
On Alive and Kicking this week, in Ireland we're renowned for loving our cup of tea, and in more recent years the herbal variety has been growing in popularity, but can it really do all it claims it can? The Ver's plus-size cover lady on the front of a fashion and beauty magazine in Ireland exposes Nadine Reid on goal planning and dream chasing. And I delve into the world of gut health. Is it really your second brain? And what do you need to do to make sure yours is at its optimum?
Alive and Kicking.
Thanks to Repromed. With me, Claire McKenna, this Sunday from 9 a.m.
on Newstalk.
Relaxing afternoons with Harvey Norman. Transform your weekend lie-in with a brand new bed. Visit Harvey Norman today and rest easy. You're in safe hands with our sleep specialists.
Reputation is everything. So for your new SUV, look no further than Kia, the SUV experts. Look at our popular Sportage, Sorento and Stonic models, or the Niro plug-in hybrid with grants up to €7,500. Look at great finance offers from as low as 0% APR. And look at a reputation for quality backed by our unique Kia 7-year warranty.